Far too often do we get isekais that follow some main protagonist character from our world that gets transported into another world, has superpowers, gets harem, defeats the demon lord, shenanigans happen, but never do we get the vantage point of the people that have to deal with the existence of these overpowered main characters in their world messing things up. And that's the vantage point that we get from The Executioner and Her Way of Life, a series that aired in the spring 2022 anime season. This is my review of the 12-episode series, so let's jump right into it. The Executioner and Her Way of Life takes place in a world that is summoning people from our world into their world. Now, this is taboo because, as we find out, these humans that are brought over to this world, they have powers. Every single one of these other worlders have a certain sort of power. But unfortunately, as they've discovered from the past, the more they use these abilities that they're given, the more they lose their mind. They lose their memories to the point where they go berserk, and that power itself can bring about the destruction of their world. So one such group within this world, the Faust, which are the highest powered people in this world, they send out these executioners in secrecy to essentially execute these other worlders. Again, this is taboo, and it's not necessarily allowed, but certain groups trying to take over from the Faust are still summoning people from the other world and using their powers against them. And we follow one such executioner, Minot, who is tasked with going and finding these other worlders that have been summoned, investigate, find them, and then kill them. And as the story starts out, Minot finds one of these other worlders, named Akari. Now, the interesting thing about Akari is that she has the ability to heal herself. But not just that, but she's able to control time itself, thus being able to heal herself. So Minot really quickly realizes, I can execute this girl, but then she just heals herself. Like, time rewinds, and she restores herself. And she can't keep just killing her over and over again, trying to figure out a way to kill her, because eventually her powers will go crazy, and she'll destroy the world. So while kind of manipulating Akari, acting like she's going to find some way of getting her back home, Minot ends up traveling with Akari as they try to find out some way, secretly, to kill Akari, while the entire time Akari just believes, oh, this Minot person's a nice person, she's gonna help me find a way home. And over time, we find out more about the Faust themselves. We find out about the overworld itself, the past disasters that have happened in the world due to these other worlders that come over with their abilities. And obviously, the strings are being pulled in the background as different groups of people are trying to use these other worlders for their own gain. The Faust, the church, the royalty, the noblesse, all these different groups that all seem to be using it for their own gain, and yes, the disasters that happen due to that power struggle. So my thoughts on The Executioner and Her Way of Life. I really did love this show. This is truly one of those very unique isekais that don't come around often. Those isekais that take the typical mold of what you would get from isekai and really twist it. Take it from a different vantage point that is, honestly, as it started out early on, very, very kind of unsettling. I mean, it's really playing in the gray area about the fact that Minot is having to execute these people that are actually good people. They didn't decide to come to this world. Somebody brought them here. But yet they're still a threat to this world and they have to be dealt with. This is kind of an experience that we get early on in the first episode where you have this one boy that's brought over due to the noblesse bringing him over to this world to use his power. And quickly Minot has to discover, okay, what is your power? Oh, okay, so yeah, you are going to possibly be a threat to this world. This guy has the ability to avoid, to be able to essentially erase whatever he wants to erase. And the moment that he uses his power, she realizes he could erase the entire world. He has to be dealt with. And she apologizes for it. It's not a case where she's like, yeah, you're a villain, I gotta kill you. No, it's, I'm sorry, I have to do this because there's no other choice here. There's no alternative that we can take. And I think playing in that gray area early on really did grab me. But it wasn't necessarily that that was the thing. Like, we were always going to have, here's person, kill him. Here's person, kill him. The story is so much more about the broader scope of what it means for people being brought over to this world. Again, getting into the past tragedies that have been caused by these other worlders. The human errors, as they call them. These different cases, these 4 different cases where these huge catastrophes happen, like entire kingdoms wiped off the map because they didn't know essentially the threat that they were facing. Utilizing this knowledge. They even have like this aspect of culture being brought over and everything, and it's already kind of been done. This has been a thing for many thousands of years that people have been brought to this world, and they've been kind of taking information from people of our modern times, Japan, and really exploiting them for their own gain. Again, it doesn't really paint the other worlders as bad guys, but they technically are. they again are a threat. Now, granted, I am in the end, my thought process is that I think that anybody that summons these people to this world are the bad guys. Let's be honest. That's something you can really figure out really early on. But it's the fact that it's in that gray area of no other choice and being forced hands is really where it gets really fascinating. But even still, so much more is being dived into that I really found fascinating. I really did like the concepts they were presenting, especially around Akari and her ability. And as things kind of unfold, you get these little thought processes of, well, did she already reset here? Like, is this a point of reset? It creates a lot of question marks that you start to really kind of puzzle it all together. Now, granted, I felt at times that the series tried to explain things too quickly. Like, I felt like there was some times where I felt like I was smart for figuring this out, and then it just kind of just plainly states it. Like, the characters aren't dumb, and so I guess it's a good thing that Minot and Momo, her sidekick, they're not dumb. Like, they can figure this stuff out like we are figuring it out. So it feels at times like it's a little bit of a letdown, but at the same time, I had a lot of fun trying to figure out that stuff, and getting that gratification when it reveals is still there. Additionally, let me say before I forget, JC staff on this series did a phenomenal job. This show looked really good. I love the style of it. I love Minot's character design. I think she looks fantastic. Ashina looks great. Momo has like a unique style to her as well. There's this little goofy thing where Momo, who's kind of Minot's apprentice, she's sort of able to manipulate fabric and stuff like that. So she kind of changes her priestess garb into what she wants, and it's got a little nice style to it. But the combat scenes were so good. Like, they had so much flow to it, so many different little mechanics to the fighting styles themselves. Minot herself being one of these Faust, one of these executioners, she has what they call scripture, which is this book that she's able to produce magic from. So she's able to funnel her mana or whatever, her ether, through this book, through the scriptures. And it was cool that the scriptures themselves are the power. So think of each of the scriptures in a book, some sort of religious book, and each of the scriptures, based on how it's stated, will cause an effect. So, you know, those that are unbelievers will hear the toll of the bell, and suddenly this big, huge bell shows up, and it rings so loud, the vibrations just erupt in people. It's so cool, creating walls and stuff with this power. I really love the cool mechanics within the combat itself. And yeah, Minot being an assassin, she has this cool dagger that she'll throw that has a string on it, and she can attach magic to it. It's the fight scenes were so really well done, and JC staff did a really great job of animating them. There was only one real slip-up point throughout the entire series, and that was at the very end. They had this really big centipede-looking thing, and they decided to use CGI for that. But outside of that, everything else looked really incredible, and I think JC staff did a phenomenal job with the series. Just really capturing that unique style this particular story has, and producing it in a really fantastic animation. Now, while I had problems with Akari early on, I really loved the entire cast of the shows, and even later on when we get into certain side characters, I really didn't think that they were going to have oomph in them, but then they come out as really great characters themselves. Minot starting out is honestly the one character that you kind of have a little bit of reservation for. She is the cold-blooded assassin. Now, I'd argue against that because she does feel guilt in a sense for what she has to do. Again, apologizing for who she has to kill. And I think she, of all the characters, is probably the one that feels like she sees less development than most of the characters, really just driving the point home to this character that this isn't set in stone. Like, you don't have to just do this one thing. You don't have to be what your master did. You can do your own thing. But there's a lot of side characters that I really did love in this story. You have Ashina, who is the princess of this one kingdom early on. She has her own devotion, her desire to save the people, and she's just got this really hot-blooded, fun attitude to her that I loved her every time she was on the scene. Yeah, she's kind of like a Saber-esque character from Fate Stay Night with this big, huge sword that she can do this big chop from. But she was a lot of fun. She was like the muscle girl of the story, and I just loved her nature. Momo, like I said, Minot's sidekick, she's just so super fun. Easily one of my favorite yanderes in a long time. Like, nothing else in this world matters except for my precious Minot. She'll blow up anything just for the sake of Minot. Erase everything as long as Minot is happy. She was so much fun. I loved her nature. She was just a spitfire. Akari, on the other hand, she was a little bit annoying at first, but I realized really quickly why that was the case. There was something in my mind that I believed that she was the way she was for purpose, and thankfully the writer delivers in that. Akari isn't the sum of what she seems like she is at the very first. And there is a story to her they get into that I found really endearing and very interesting. Even later cases with like villain characters like Menon and stuff, they did so well in giving this facade early on that they're very simple characters, but then doing something really cool with them. I really did love the entire cast of this series, and every single one of them that showed up on the screen either had really great personalities that I enjoyed, even if they didn't have great stories, or they were characters that had a lot of development behind them that they wanted to reveal over time. Now, unfortunately, this gets into the part that I get pause on, the part that I have to give warning to people. Unfortunately, as much as I love the Exectuioner Way of Life, and this is easily one of my favorite shows of this season, and maybe might end up in my top list of the entire year, there's one stain on it, and that is that it opens too many doors at the end, and it closes very few of them. So keep that in mind. I don't know yet this is going to be one of those cases of source material bait. I really do feel at this point it probably is, unless we get an announcement of second season, which I kind of highly doubt. I don't know this show had that much attention around it. But as it stands now, unless you see a second season announced, know that there's a lot of stuff here that they purposely opened the door for. Like, the last 2 episodes, they're constantly revealing certain things that I'm like, I want to know more about this. Like, this is cool, let's get into this. But I'm like, no, there's only an episode and a half left. I know that you're not going to get into this. It did that. And it even had, like, the final scenes of the last episode start showing things, and it's like, we're not going to touch this. Why are you showing it to me? It really did put in all efforts to really kind of reveal what's to come, and without a second season, that means that unless you're willing to read the actual novels, you're probably not going to get that information. So that's my big pause in really suggesting this series, is that aspect. Do I still think the journey was worth it? Yes. I love this show. Like I said, I had so much fun watching the shows, and it had so many cool elements that they revealed and put conclusions to. There's a good, like, 3 arcs to this adaptation, but I am a little miffed by the ending. I do feel like a lot of things were kind of purposely shown that we are not going to get answers to unless we get another season. But yes, with all that said, I really do love this series. It's going to go down as one of my favorite isekais of all time, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I just love the world they're in, the mechanics, the element of the otherworlders, the human errors, the class systems, the magic, the combat, the animation. Everything just was put together to make a really fantastic series that, yes, like I said, I really do hope we get a second season of. But until then, with my warnings there, I do highly suggest this series. I had a lot of fun watching it. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the Execcutioner Way of Life. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button down below, comment. Let me know what you thought of this series if you're going to be checking it out. Additionally, I would appreciate it if you've not already, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you get all my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you'd like to support us more, I would appreciate it if you would consider supporting us through Patreon or through our tips link or our super thanks button down below. I definitely appreciate everybody that does, and y'all take care.